Folks, we'd like at this time to introduce to you Mr. John Bergener Jr. He is the chair of New York Divide Caucus. At this time, welcome to the program. Welcome to today's Truth Revealed. Mr. Bergener, how are you today, sir?
Very good. How are you?
Fantastic. I know we planned this out several weeks ago, and then we had the holiday, and so it's been a kind of a long wait, and a lot has happened since then. And one of the things that happened is we found out who our governor was going to run against, and Mr. Lee Zeldin. And so, what is your opinion on that? Do you think he has a shot?
I think it's going to be a close race.
You think so?
Yes, it depends how many things get highlighted in it, because the state is basically bankrupt now.
Yeah.
But they're counting on being bailed out with the Build Back Better budget that has to be passed by October 1st. So if they're bailed out, then we're okay. Otherwise, we're in serious trouble.
Gotcha. So for those of you who do not know, Mr. Bergener has a very interesting proposal. I don't know if you all know, but New York State is not what it used to be. We live in a very beautiful state, and people are leaving. Hundreds a day are leaving this state because of politics. And Mr. Bergener has a very interesting concept. As noted earlier, he's the chair of Divide New York. Divide New York, not Unify New York, Divide. So he has an interesting concept that I think we need to have an open mind about, because at this point, what do we have to lose, really? I mean, we got to do something different, because we cannot continue on this merry-go-round. We need to stop the music. And most of us just want to get off of this with the gun laws that's going on, with the financial issues. Can you please tell the folks your concept and what you think a possible solution for the state is? And I already told the folks, keep an open mind about it, all right?
All righty. Well, it's based on a proposal that's over 150 years old, which was to divide New York into two states. It has bounced back and forth depending on who was in power at the time. Sometimes New York City proposed it the most recently in the 70s, and sometimes upstate proposes it. It always gets shot down by Congress, which thinks the Northeast doesn't deserve another two senators because New England states are so small, geographically at least. So when we looked into that, the next best thing would be autonomous regions.
Regions, okay.
All it would take was an amendment to the state constitution. It requires no federal input.
Wait a minute, the feds would have nothing to do with this whatsoever.
It has no effect on the federal level.
Okay.
We'd still have two senators elected statewide at large, and congressional districts would still be drawn. So basically, by bypassing that, we skip the federal government, because we're not creating new states, we're just creating autonomous regions, which are sort of like a super county, but more, almost a state, but not quite. Each autonomous region would have its own regional legislature, have its own regional governor, and its own regional secretary of state, who would appoint the attorney general and the motor vehicle commissioner. The other appointments would be under the regional governor. The token state government would still have a governor, a lieutenant governor, and the state controller, which allows us to keep all the pensions at the token state government level unchanged. So it wouldn't affect any state pensions at all.
Got you.
The regional legislators would serve for 6 weeks a year as the state legislature, with their votes weighted by the size of their district, which conforms with Reynolds versus Sims, a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on one man, one vote.
Gotcha.
So basically, that's how it would be set up. Because what we researched and what's killing us is differences. We would break the state into 3 autonomous regions.
Gotcha.
The upstate region would be New Amsterdam, which would be everything north of the Westchester-Rockland line. Westchester, Rockland, Nassau, and Suffolk would be the Montauk region. And New York City would be the New York region. This gives the lines are drawn this way, so all 3 of the regions are financially able to support themselves. Because there were a couple studies done on splitting us into separate states, and they said upstate couldn't support itself. But by adding 3 counties to the upstate region, we become financially viable because you would pay income tax where you live. Our plan would be to be governed more like on the Vermont or Pennsylvania model, which has a much lower tax base.
Yeah.
And is much more pro-business. A lot of the problems in New York's government is basically based on they're trying to have one size fits all, and because things that work in a densely populated area don't work in a not densely populated area, it's killing the upstate economy.
Yeah.
And for the last 15 years, this has forced downstate to send money upstate, which they're required to because we're one state and we do not have autonomous governments that are separated. Prior to 15 years ago, upstate used to send money downstate, but that hasn't occurred anymore.
So what made that change though?
All the factories leaving upstate.
Okay, so less businesses upstate. Change that. Okay.
Right. GE is a shell of its former self.
Absolutely.
IBM is a shell of its former self. You could go on and on. Everybody knows the list.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
we've seen them walk away every year. They're walking away from New York State.
Right, because you cannot impose in a less densely populated area the regulations that are needed in a densely populated city. We have 2 bills in the legislature right now to do this. It's A0446 and S4541.
Yeah.
So they propose a constitutional amendment to the state constitution.
Gotcha.
There's only 2. It requires the legislature to pass it twice, a constitutional amendment, and then it goes to the voters, and there has to be an election of legislators in between. So in the unlikely scenario they were to pass it in the lame duck session, they could pass it again in 2023 and it would go to the voters in November 2023, but that's unlikely.
Yeah.
It may become likelier because of the financial straits New York is in that we mentioned a little earlier.
Yes, sir.
New York State used to get 20% of its income revenue from just 2,000 families.
Wow.
Which, unfortunately, I was never one of them.
Yeah, I mean, they must have been pretty wealthy families.
They are probably still.
Yeah.
But since the pandemic, about 1,000 of those families have permanently relocated out of state.
Wow.
So we've lost 10% of their income revenue. If you notice, the state legislature has gotten quiet about taxing the rich now or raising the income tax on the rich because they're afraid more of the remaining 1,000 might move out of state.
Wow.
And once they move, the taxes are lost.
Before we go further, I know I'm going to forget to come back to it. So I want to ask now, you mentioned earlier a token government. Can you kind of expound on what you mean by that? I didn't want to go too far without coming back to that.
Okay. What the amendment does is it allows for the governor, under the U.S. Constitution, you have to have a governor. So you also need a lieutenant governor. And we leave the controller at the token state governor level so that the pension system doesn't have to be touched at all. It just remains unchanged.
Hmm.
Now, what we do with the governor's office is we reduce his power. So he'll have slightly more power than the Queen of England currently does. Would be the best example I could give you. The governor would exist, but he'd just be a figurehead.
Almost like King and Queen of England, kind of, sort of.
Sort of.
Okay.
What we do too is you have to have a state legislature under the U.S. Constitution. So what we do is have the 3 regional legislators serve as the state legislature for 6 weeks a year.
Yeah.
Because that's all the time they'll would need, because there's very little you can do at the state level under this amendment. It takes all the power and gives it to the regional legislatures. Regional laws become supreme over state laws and the like. But we have to, for certain things,
Mm-hmm.
actually have a list of laws in the amendment that have to remain at the state level because the U.S. Constitution requires it. And the rest of them all become regional laws. When they become regional laws, they can be, and they're deleted from the state code. So laws like the SAFE Act and all the other laws that they've passed recently could be changed by the regions. Each region would conduct its own elections, and they'd have a coordinated election for the statewide officials that have to be elected. We would redraw court district boundaries so they don't cross regional lines. So it's almost like being separate states, but a little proviso. And we kept some of the expensive things at the token state government level, like pensions.
Yeah.
So they remain up there. We also have a clause in there that New York City retains ownership of its water system in upstate and Montauk.
Yep.
And the reason for that is quite simple. We will need New York City votes to get this passed, and New York City is not going to vote themselves out of their water system. That just ain't going to happen.
That's just not going to happen. That would be foolish.
Right.
Yeah.
So what it would do is it would help upstate by allowing us to get rid of regulations. And it also requires upstate and Montauk to look at all their unfunded mandates, and requires a 3/5 vote to keep any of them.
Yeah.
If you don't know what for people who don't know what an unfunded mandate is, the state of New York, rather than raise state taxes, has slowly over the years mandated that local governments do certain things and use their tax money to do them.
Yep.
It's gotten so now that in my home county, Albany, all of the Albany County property tax and 2% of their 4% sales tax just goes to unfunded mandates. The county operates on a 2% sales tax.
Wow.
And that's true for most other counties. It varies a little bit. And we cannot get a complete list of all the mandates that are out there. Some of them may not be enforced, but a lot of them only add like 5 cents, 1,000 to your property taxes or something. When you multiply it by the fact there's probably 50,000 of them, it adds up quickly.
It adds up. Yeah. So do you think by dividing, would that solve many of the financial problems?
It would, because the amendment says for the upstate region and Montauk region, they have to review within 1 year all unfunded mandates, and any they don't reenact by a 3/5 vote disappear.
Yeah.
So that would reduce a lot of the things that cause property taxes to be too high. So that would immediately make us more financially viable.
Yeah.
And that would allow businesses to come back, because a lot of these regulations, a few of them would still be enacted. Like there's one that says if you have a public water system, you have to test it every month for contaminants.
Yep.
There's not too many people that would be against that.
Yeah. Safe water. I mean, nobody's gonna have a problem with that.
Right. But there are a lot of them don't make sense. One of the ones for school districts that is insane is school districts currently have to conduct their own elections totally.
Yeah.
It costs the average size school district about $500,000 a year to do that. Instead of using the county board of elections to conduct their elections, it's illegal for the county board of elections to conduct school district elections.
Huh.
And one of the things that really is crazy about it is, if you are aware that in state elections you can't require a photo ID, you can for a school district election.
Doesn't make sense.
Well, for school districts, they often don't use the county registration rolls. So the only way they can tell if somebody belongs is with a photo ID, because a few school districts have contracted with the county for access for their registration rolls, but then they have to pay the county for them. So that's another expense.
Wow.
But others just don't have registration rolls. They just use photo IDs when you show up, and try to figure out from your driver's license if you're in the school district or not.
Wow.
The other thing it would do is allow adjustment of the school funding formula, which is currently a mess.
Yep.
And that's another reason school property taxes are so high. Say you're in a school district like, let's pick Guilderland.
Yeah.
Okay, town of Guilderland. A lot of people in Guilderland don't have a Guilderland zip code. They have an Albany zip code,
Or Schenectady. Yeah.
or Schenectady, or an
Yeah.
Altamont. Well, what happens there is there is a Schenectady school district. There is an Albany school district. The tax, part of the formula is based on the average income of people in your school district. And you write on your tax form your school district. For some reason, the state does not edit that field or double check it. So if you write Albany there, they credit your income to the city of Albany. So that hurts Albany's funding,
Yeah.
helps Guilderland's.
Yeah. Yep.
And the same is true with Schenectady and the like, because they don't have any cross checks on that. Plus the school funding formula, they haven't bothered to delete anything out of it in about 20 years.
Wow.
So they just keep adding more things to it.
And never
So-
deleting. Wow. Incredible.
Right. So what happens is the state education department takes its best guess under the formula of how much each school district gets.
Yep.
And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but it's very difficult to find out if they are right or wrong. So most school districts just accept it unless it's a major cut or something. So you can't even be sure that your school district is getting the proper amount of state aid.
Wow.
So they have a lot of mandates like that cost a fortune.
Yep.
The other thing is they passed the cost of Medicaid, 25% of it, down to local counties
Yep.
and to the city of New York, rather than the state managing it itself. So that ups the property taxes a great deal. So you've got a major thing there. We have a whole page on our website, which is www.dividenewyork.org.
.org.
That has all the financial information there to show how this works.
Yeah.
Because there have been studies done that shows it can't work, and it can't work if you make two assumptions.
Yeah.
The first assumption was that we would leave those three counties out of the upstate region. And the second assumption was that we'd operate exactly the same way New York State does now. And the whole purpose of dividing is to not operate
It's
the same.
yeah.
This would also help the city of New York to pick up New York City voters, because one, they wouldn't have to send money upstate anymore. Two, they would have control of their own subway system.
Oh, because the subway system is actually Metro North, right?
It's part of Metropolitan Transit Authority, yes.
Gotcha. Yep.
Oh, one thing we do for transit is Metro North and Long Island Railroad stay under the token state government because
Okay.
they would cross regional lines.
Yeah. Okay.
But the Metropolitan Transit Authority itself would be split in three for each region,
Yep.
and the majority of it would be under the control of New York City's region.
Gotcha.
How to show you how the state has mismanaged the subway system. I assume you've been hearing articles about subway trains getting caught in stations
Oh
occasionally.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, a lot of the times why that happens is they have the old-fashioned third rail on the ground,
Yep.
and it floods and shorts out the third
What's
rail
up?
in
I
enough
grew up in New
circuits,
York, so I know.
and consecutively that the train just dies underground.
Yep.
The reason that's happening is so stupid that you think it's a joke. When it was designed, they put weep holes in the track to drain the water away from the electrical circuits.
Yep.
And they had all these people called weep hole clearers that would walk the tracks when they're not in use, put a little rod down the weep hole, and keep it open.
Yep.
The state thought they could save money by not replacing them when they retired.
1 second here. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, running out of time. That's okay. But go ahead, finish.
So that's basically why the trains are flooding out, is because nobody's clearing the drainage holes.
Nobody's pumping them out.
Right.
Wow.
So they got, and even if you were to hire people now to do it, they're very small holes. How do you find them?
Wow. Yeah, so basically this will be dividing New York will be a financial solution to all of these little issues that make up very big ones altogether, you know.
Right. It's all little issues that are killing us. We're not dying over major.
It's not one big major thing. Yeah.
Right. It's all these little things that are killing us.
Has anything like this been tried before? Or is this the first time?
Autonomous regions, the closest we could find is some states give their counties a lot more autonomy. Like Louisiana and Alaska gives its districts more autonomy.
Okay.
They call them districts there, and they call them parishes in Louisiana. But this would be the first time to be given full autonomy.
Wow. This sounds very, very interesting. It's something that when I first heard about it, I'm like, that is very foreign to the ears, you know. But when you're desperate, you know, I just don't see a problem trying something different.
It would actually help each state and county a lot because they'd be totally separate.
Yeah.
We wouldn't interfere with each other anymore. Oh, one other thing is we also allow the Montauk region and the New York region to own some of the prisons upstate because most of their prisoners come from downstate. So they would just transfer prisoners to the appropriate prison.
Gotcha.
Very few of the prisons would be maintained by the upstate region because
it's just they're just on the land up here, basically.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. Wow. So this is very interesting, very fascinating. So does this have a big following right now?
It has a very big following. We estimate our support is about between 500,000 to 800,000 people.
Wow.
But we're having a very tough time getting it through resolutions passed in local governments to support it and getting the legislature to co-sponsor. We have more co-sponsors. We keep gaining co-sponsors, but we're nowhere near the majority of co-sponsors we need to get it out of committee. It would work. It's just getting it out of committee is the tough part.
Yeah, that's the tough one. Getting off the ground.
It took us several years to get it introduced. This is the end of the fourth year it's been in the legislature, so we're doing good. And the amendment is self-implementing. It's a little over 30 pages long for that reason.
Yep.
And the reason for that is what happened to Staten Island. Back in 1996 or 7, they voted to leave New York City and become the city of Staten Island.
Yep.
They got 65% of the vote in Staten Island to leave. That required the legislature to ratify it. The bill is still in committee.
Wow.
So what we did on this one is the amendment has automatic implementing legislation. It automatically takes effect as soon as the voters approve it. And it automatically schedules itself and everything. So there is no more action needed by the legislature to implement it once it's passed.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's I'm hoping that people will tune in and give you a listen and at least give it have an open mind for it and try to follow. Please can you give the website out one more time for the folks?
Certainly, it's divideny.org. Divideny.org.
All right, divideny.org. So we're kind of running out of time, but I just wanted to give you like the last minute or so to say whatever's on your mind, just for the people. And I certainly thank you for coming on, but go ahead and take a minute or so and just say whatever is most important to you.
If you go to our website, it will tell you how you can help. There's two ways to help. You can either get your legislator, if they're not already a co-sponsor of the bills, to be a co-sponsor of the bills. And you can also ask your town, city, county, village to pass a home rule resolution supporting the bills.
Gotcha.
Those are the two options people have to get this moving. That's basically where you stand. Once the January first hits, the bill numbers change again because bill numbers recycle every January 1st of odd numbered years. So next year, the bill numbers will be different.
Wow. Well, I certainly know that come November and we're left with this current governor here, I just don't know. I just don't see 4 years of her. I just can't imagine what this state's going to look like. We got to do something, folks. We got to do something. Maybe Lee Zeldin has a chance, but the way I'm looking at it, I don't think he does. But I certainly, not that he's the greatest thing ever either, but anybody, Casper the Friendly Ghost would be better than her right now. It's just getting ridiculous. We're talking one of the worst. We have the hardest gun restrictions, us, Illinois, Chicago, and California. But yet we have the most gun violence. So what does that tell you? That these restrictions they don't do anything. You're just restricting law-abiding citizens. But that's another story, another time. But that would be another solution right there, because we live a lot different. Albany and Guilderland and Schenectady, where I came from Brooklyn, so I know it's a different life up here than it is in Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan or whatever. Altogether different. So I certainly appreciate you coming on, taking the time to explain this, and I certainly hope that if there's any changes or anything you want to give me a call and come back on and we'll talk about it.
Oh, definitely. Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate you, and God bless you, and we'll be praying for your effort. And if there's anything else we can do other than we are going to go to the website and check it out and see what we can do to help. And I hope all of the listeners will do the same. But we want to say God bless you to you and your family and your efforts. And we'll talk to you real soon again. All right.
All righty.
All right. God bless you. Take care.
Good night.